location is quite fascinating, and it's changed remarkably. When we went there in 2010, it was a very steep one-lane gravel road with many hairpin turns. And when you get to the top of the mountain, there were only 8 houses. I interviewed 3 people about 2 or 3 years later, and things had drastically changed. They actually saw, I'm pretty sure they counted them, 20 of those big electrical trucks, like the kind that move into a disaster area to get the lines all back up again. So we're talking
Yes.
large vehicles. There were 20 of those, and they were installing big, I'll call them telephone poles, but they were like 5 or 6 feet in diameter, so they're huge. And the cables that were being strung up, going up the mountain to where there's only 8 houses, were 10 inches in diameter. And the road has been graded and smoothed out, and so something big is going on up there because you wouldn't have that kind of power um, going into a place with only 8 homes.
Absolutely not. And by having the mobile capacity with those vehicles, they could be taking that anywhere.
That's correct. And she's seen other things too. She said one time she saw a big tractor trailer with a huge. Well, this was after she felt an explosion. She didn't know if it was an earthquake or an explosion. And the next day, this tractor trailer with a big, huge thing covered in a tarp comes by her house on this little one-lane road. There is a white escort uh, truck in front and in back, and there's a man walking along the side of the cab of the tractor trailer, and they go up through the gate that goes up to this area that's kind of forbidden. And then late in the day, it comes back down the mountain again with the escorts, and a different shaped object is under a tarp. So her conclusion was something exploded in the facility beneath the ground and it had to be replaced.
Oh my goodness.
And she said, for years they would see vehicles go up with 3 people in them in the morning, and then 3 different people would come back at night. And according to, her observation, she felt like people were up there for like 3-day shifts at a time. So that's a very active place.
Is there is that talked about publicly? I mean, do people talk about it at the grocery store or the local people?
No.
Wow.
And the government has bought up additional land to extend the Chimney Rock Park so that there is an increased buffer zone. So there's only one way to get up this mountain, and people will not be able to build around it or get close to it. So that's another thing that indicates how hard they're working at keeping it off limits from the public. And even one of the sites that I wrote about in the book is at the Pisgah Astronomical Research Institute, which we simply refer to as Perry, Pari. Um, that seems to be the oldest of the facilities that I've written about, and it was built where the Department of Defense at one time had their satellite monitoring system set up during the Cold War. And it's been converted, and we've had 2 people with above high security clearance tell us that there is a city-sized facility beneath Perry that's totally self-sufficient. And just within the last 6 months, I believe, I was contacted by a man who told me that there was active digging going on at that facility again, and I started doing a Google search of the entire area, and southwest of the main facility at Perry, you can see 2 big black tarps covering what appears to be a hole, and there's earth-moving equipment, and it looks like dirt is being brought up and then spread out over an empty area. And I have a picture of a soil sample from the area. And the topsoil is dark, and the deeper you go, the whiter and lighter the soil becomes, and the soil that's being spread out is the light color, which means it's coming from the deeper ground. So something is being expanded at that facility.
You know, I just find all of this fascinating, and as much as I hate to, we have to take a 3-minute break. And we will be right back because I want to talk more about this. This is fascinating to me. But we'll be back in 3.
You are listening to WPHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk radio.
Welcome back. It is 23 minutes after the hour. You are listening to Fate Mag Radio here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I'm Kat Hobson. I'm your host with my guest, Mary Joyce. And we were discussing this secret facility under the Perry Pisgah Astrological Research Institute. And I am just amazed because if you were not environmentally aware of the makeup of the soil there, even with having had the tip-off, you might have missed just how deep they were digging.
I honestly think that I am helped spiritually with this website, and I don't really feel like it's just my website. Because that idea of getting a picture of a soil sample from that area, just came to me, and I sometimes get amazed at the ideas that come. So I don't think I should take credit for them all.
Well, no, but you implement them. You're open to that.
Correct.
And has it been that way with all of the various topics that you cover?
Yeah, I usually wear my newspaper person's hat most of the time when I'm doing radio shows. Um, but my whole life has also had a spiritual direction to it. Also, um, back in the 1986, I went through what I call a spiritual boot camp, where things kept happening to me that could not be explained in normal terms. And about the time I stood up like a boxer in the ring and thought I had it all figured out, I'd get knocked down with something else that was unexplainable. And looking back on it, I call that my spiritual boot camp. And since then, I feel like in many ways I am guided. For example, the Tangible Evidence of Jesus book, I was awakened like 3 o'clock in the morning, and he came through and wanted this book done because he wanted people to understand that about, a lot about him that just simply is not in the Bible. The Bible has been messed with and chopped up so many different ways that some of the truth has been forgotten. So that was the inspiration. I didn't intend to write a book called Tangible Evidence of Jesus. I was really directed to do that.
I find that very special, Mary, because a lot of people, as I said, do not follow the guidance that they're given. They fight it. And here you are.
But again, I kind of fight it because I really am more comfortable talking as a researcher and a journalist. Yes, I will talk about the spiritual aspect, but I usually don't start out that way. I've heard too many people who are in la la land with their spiritual understanding, and I don't want to be identified with it.
Well, I would never imagine anyone describing you as in la la land.
Well, you know what I mean.
I do know what you mean, and I understand that's a very real concern.
And another thing that I wrestle with all the time is the word God has been, so many different distorted ideas have been hung on the word God that I almost hate to use it. And in many ways, I feel much more comfortable with a term that the Native Americans use a lot, which is the Creator.
Yes.
God of the Old Testament and God of fundamental religions is a very foreboding, very human-like figure, and I think God goes way beyond anything human. So, again, I stumble on the word God.
I understand. And I use Creator, I would guess maybe 98% of the time in that scope. But I also know that you can't know what happens without understanding that there's nothing human about God or about the Creator, other than the compassion and empathy that is shown to us, I think.
We got an image that came through in a message many, many years ago, and it compared a human being to an ant at the toe of God. And an ant can't comprehend the toe, let alone the body, let alone what goes on in the mind of the human being it's just run into. So there was the comparison or analogy made between man the ant and God the human, just to kind of give a perspective of how we can't possibly understand it.
That's a great analogy. That had to be thought-provoking for years, if not still.
But usually when those kind of messages come through, it's much more eloquent than I can speak it.
Well, I understand that too. You do a pretty good job, though.
Not poetic, though.
No, but you are cut to the chase.
Many, many years ago, when I actually was doing spiritual consultations for people back in Florida a long, long time ago, a message came through for my sister. And of course, who's going to believe stuff coming from your own sister? So what happened was the entire message came through in rhyming poetry. And she knew darn well I couldn't do it. Maybe given a week or so I could do it, but not just off the top of my tongue, rattle off with poetry. So that got her attention, and I know it was done just to show that it wasn't her sister with the information.
So there's a sense of humor